The smartest boy you've ever seen, or a superpowered mind with a mechanical canine? Nick and Cartoon Network have their own set of resident boy geniuses relatively close to one another, with Jimmy Neutron and Dexter, no last name. So it begs the question, which one of these boys is actually the smarter boy genius? Well, we've got to look at a few categories for this one. Their inventions, their problem solving skills, their social intelligence, and their common sense. Let's look at their inventions first. Honestly, Dexter and Jimmy have a pretty few similar inventions. Both of them are capable of time travel and manipulating time. Both of them can shrink and grow people. Both of them are able to create robots with complex AI, and both of them have messed around with the human body, be it through mutations or aging. But Dexter seems to have more success when it comes to the more advanced experiments. For instance, Dexter was able to age himself up perfectly fine without any risk of aging to dust like when Jimmy, Carl, and Sheen became old men. Or how about the multitude of times Dexter has genetically modified and created new creatures, such as the Chupacabra and Timmy the Flea. Now Jimmy has inventions that mess with genetics, and he's dabbled in messing with people's internal chemistry before, but he's never created something on the level of, say, a flea or even a family of fleas that can eat metal. The most Jimmy has done that hasn't radically transformed someone is manipulate plant DNA. And even then, when it comes to something like, say, Mrs. Fowl becoming a giant plant monster, or Sheen's brain growing radically larger, that was an accident. Whereas when Dexter starts messing with people's genetics, he's largely successful if not for something like, say, Dee Dee messing with the machine behind his back, or circumstances he couldn't see coming, like making his vision too well. The point being that Dexter is largely successful in doing what he intends to do when it comes to manipulating people's body, whereas when Jimmy does it, it's a complete side effect of a completely different experiment. We can also compare their laboratories against each other, with Jimmy having a smaller, more cozy lab with a relatively simple AI in his computer, compared to Dexter, whose laboratory seems to stretch for miles on end, with an AI much more advanced than Vox's, given that it's capable of expressing emotion and doing things rather than a simple quick analysis.
Oh, just shut up and make me a sandwich.
And that's not even getting into all of the giant mechs that Dexter has, whereas the closest thing that Jimmy has is Goddard. So with all said and done, we can say that Dexter has the smarter, more advanced inventions. But what about their problem solving skills? When faced with a problem, how do either of them handle things? Well, they both have their fair share of incidents where they've created problems that they've had to solve for themselves. Rogue AI, mutations, creating a robot mom to do the chores. Now, most of these situations were started by different problems and led to different problems. For instance, the mom AI Jimmy created simply took the job too seriously, whereas the only reason the mom bot Dexter made failed was because Dee Dee stole the remote. So let's compare two scenarios wherein the two of them accidentally mutate someone into a monster. Dee Dee for Dexter, and Miss Fowl for Jimmy. The two of them take completely different approaches in facing the problem, with Dexter being so hell-bent on not hearing Dee Dee's story that the thought of turning Dee Dee back into a human never even crosses his mind, instead just making himself a monster to throw hands with her. As opposed to Jimmy, whose first instinct upon seeing his teacher turn into a giant spinach monster is to try and change her back to normal, which he eventually succeeds at. Or, we could take a more direct comparison, wherein Jimmy also accidentally turned his friends into monsters, and Jimmy solved this problem by turning himself into a monster, but had the wherewithal to turn himself into a monster that could, win. I also want to make an honorable mention to the fact that Jimmy, after his dad accidentally stuck him and his friends in prehistoric times, was able to recreate the device that sent them there and could send them back out of berries, wood, and a diamond. A level of problem solving that Dexter has never shown, since when he has no technology to rely on, he's kind of helpless, with very few exceptions. I'd say desert island scenario, but we've seen both Jimmy and Cindy on a desert island able to survive perfectly fine, something that we can't really say the same for with Dexter. Now, he's never really been stuck in that specific scenario, but he's been trapped in similar situations where his technology couldn't help him, like when he's dealing with a bully or when his lab shuts down due to a power outage. We should also take into account the idea that Jimmy has a pretty extensive rogues gallery who push and challenge him in all types of different ways. He's had to deal with fellow evil geniuses, rich kids who could just buy better technology than him, and God knows how many alien invaders. Meanwhile, the biggest thorn in Dexter's side besides Dee Dee is Mandark, who doesn't really challenge Dexter the same way Jimmy's villains do. So we can give the problem solving skills edge to Jimmy. Now when it comes to friendships and social intelligence, Dexter doesn't really have that many. At least not many consistent friends. We see in a few episodes, like the one with the bully who hates funny accents, or the episode where he and his fellow Trekkies end up in a Barbie convention, that he is capable of making friends. But outside of those guys who we never really see talk to Dexter after said episode, his only real consistent friend was Douglas, who we only really see in the first 2 seasons. Dexter is also a really awkward kid who loves flaunting his intelligence. Jimmy is too, don't get me wrong. Jimmy hates being made to look the fool, but Dexter gets a real kick out of it. You can tell by the way he goes to school, how he shows off at science fairs, and how he pretty much takes over and sucks all of the fun of his D&D campaign. Now compare this to Jimmy, who has his 2 best friends that stay loyal to him throughout the entire show, barring any spin-offs of course, along with getting along with pretty much the entire rest of the school, except for Cindy, Libby, Butch, and sometimes Nick. And even then, his friendships with Cindy and Libby grew stronger over time. Whereas with Dexter, he just sort of remains that socially awkward kid, doesn't really have any concrete friends to speak of. So Jimmy is smarter when it comes to social issues. But what about common sense? What about just basic knowledge? What about basic critical thinking skills? Again, we're gonna have to give it to Jimmy. Dexter is kind of blind and stupid when it comes to obvious shit that should be obvious. Say, for example, failing to realize that he's inside of a dog instead of his sister, and just assuming that Dee Dee has contracted some sort of canine disease. Now that's not to say Jimmy doesn't have his moments of lacking any common sense, like say, doing mental math at a cash register instead of ringing everybody up so that there's a proper record of transactions, or mouthing off to your manager because you can't stand the idea of not looking stupid or not using the basic term salt.
Actually, dude, it's salt.
That's what I said, sodium chloride.
It's just that Dexter has more of these moments. Like how about the time that Dexter messed with the whack-a-mole machine and was shocked to find that security wasn't gonna let him have it. Or fuck, we can even compare 2 exact same ideas that Jimmy and Dexter had with differing results. Both Dexter and Jimmy had taken a famous inventor from the past and brought them into the future in order to marvel at all the new technology. With Jimmy, he brought back famous inventor and con man Thomas Edison to prove Cindy wrong about something.
Where I come from, that's copyright infringement! Copyright infringement!
With Dexter, he brought back a caveman that discovered fire. Like, bro, really a caveman? A big 4-headed hairy motherfucker who's more than likely discovered fire on accident that can't even speak proper language? And what you expect to happen happens. He freaks out at all the blinking lights and shiny metal because he's a fucking caveman and starts wreaking havoc on Dexter's lab. At least Jimmy had the wherewithal to bring back somebody who could speak English. Or we can even compare 2 similar instances where their common sense goes into conflict with their logic, and one was at least able to realize he was wrong before it was too late. Their meetings with Santa Claus. Both Dexter and Jimmy believe themselves too smart to believe in someone like Santa. However, when both are presented with the jolly man himself, they have different reactions. Jimmy, upon finally getting to see Santa for himself, believes relatively quickly that Santa is real because he's able to believe it based on evidence that he can perceive.
Santa Claus? It's true! You are real!
Dexter, meanwhile, is so dug into the idea that Santa and his reindeer are just his parents playing pretend that he refuses to admit he's wrong even when the clues are obviously staring him in the face, such as Santa refusing to break the act whatsoever, or having a reindeer snarl in his face and ripping its antlers clean off.
Mom, you got to learn to let these go! I mean, I am not going to be your little boy forever.
It takes seeing Santa, Dee Dee, and his parents all in the same room at once for him to finally admit that Santa is real, even after he's shaved Santa's beard off himself to see that it wasn't his father. So Jimmy has more common sense at the end of it. To sum it all up, Dexter may have more impressive technology, what with mechs, time travel and whatnot, better robots, more successful genetic mutations to work. But outside of that, based on socializing, common sense, and problem solving skills, Jimmy proves to be the smarter boy genius. I may be small, but I've got a big brain. But you can call me Crit.